my story. Okay. And we should be good now.
You can take a nap.
Yeah, when I'm talking. I figured if I wasn't going yet, I'd keep it on. Hey, everybody. Hi, I'm excited to be, yeah. Wow, there's so many of you. Listen, like Kelly said, like, we have a small audience. It's going to be small applause. That was a great applause. Okay. So, two things before I get into the real, meat of this story. One, when I came out as trans, while they were not ready for it, and while they've stumbled along the way, my parents were very supportive, and they remain to this day staunch allies. Two, I grew up in a cool church. Okay, I had a lesbian couple teaching my Sunday school. We were a sanctuary church. It was a nice time. But even the best allies fuck up sometimes. And no cool church started as a cool church. Okay? And all of them have older people who have been in that church since, going way back in their families. And even though they don't agree with the changes and the things that are being said and done by the church now, they aren't going anywhere. So this is the story of the Thanksgiving where my dad informed me that classic old lady name was visiting. I'm not giving her real name, but that gives you a clue. Is it Doris? Is it Phyllis? It's in that vein. And I was skeptical, and I honestly almost skipped Thanksgiving. Now, the year before, it had just been me and my parents, and it had gone surprisingly well. So I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and give classic old lady name a wide berth. That was the plan. So, but I also had lots of contingency plans. I was just like, hey, if this goes badly, I might show up. I told this to a couple people. I might show up. I don't know what's going to go on with this. So classic old lady name. She had, for years, I don't want to say she crashed, but she was a guest at some families' Thanksgiving dinners, but for some reason she wasn't going to that one. I don't know. Maybe they had realized what I'd known. So classic old lady name. She is a case of the sweet old lady who, if you actually pay attention to her actions and her words, like, isn't? Okay, so here she was coming to Thanksgiving dinner, and she walks in. My parents say, hi, classic old lady name. I say hi, and she says, hi, Jay. And Jay, those are the initials of my, Jeff and Janet. I can tell you my parents' names. They're great in this story. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Janet. And then, walked past me. So here's the thing. I was prepared for dead name. I was ready for it. I knew my parents weren't going to use it. Maybe they'd slip up, but they weren't going to try to. You know what's worse than hearing your dead name at Thanksgiving dinner? not being referred to at all. It's just, so it was at that point that I decided, oh, I'm sitting next to you. So that's what I did. And it was a great time. Now, here's the thing. Not only is she, not great with LGBT people and not okay with my transness, but she's also not a great house guest. Okay? And so, and apparently not a very adventurous eater at all. Because, like, let's see, what did we have? We had sweet potatoes. I don't want that. She wanted turkey. She wanted mashed potatoes. She wanted cranberry sauce. And she got the turkey. She got the mashed potatoes. And she asked, hey, you, closest she's come to referring to me. Can you pass the cranberry sauce? And I did that, and I would pass things to her, and I noticed that, like, she would wait till it was, like, been out of my hand for a while before she'd touch it. So here I am, making the decision that my hand stayed on that can for the entire meal. Because I'm a petty bitch. Okay, so, this is, I'm trying to think, this was 8 years ago? How long have I been out? I don't know. This was a while ago. But I still remember vividly when my mom drives this woman back to her home, and my dad says to me, whoa, I'm really sorry we made you go through that. And also, I think she might not be that great. I'm just like, oh, really? So, what was your first clue? Because I've known this for a while. And here's the thing. I've also found out that not only was she, like, not a great house guest and not cool with me being trans, but way younger at that time than I thought she was. Because my parents were in their 60s at this time, and now they're in their 70s. And she's in her 80s, and I'm just like, wait, she's only 69? Wow, being nasty ages you. So my dad tells me he's sorry I went through this, and, we're not going to do that again. So while this wasn't a great Thanksgiving dinner, I did, in the end, have my parents on my side, and I got to make a sweet old lady who wasn't that sweet really uncomfortable. And I think that's the true meaning of Thanksgiving.
And while Donna is making her way up here, I'll do the quick mic sanitization. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the mic sanitation. So if you're watching on the live stream, which I guess would be the only place you would be watching, unless you were here, which you are not, but I made the little tiny queer coloring book and activity book for surviving your holidays. I'm going to put the link again, so that's like free for the download. That's just like a little special thing to help you get through. There's things like family bingo and a holiday sweater you wish you could have, just one that says, it's not that fucking hard, So, anyway. Coming to the stage.
back belt loop. I'm serious.
Yep. And give it up for Donna, everyone.
Oh, bring the mic up? No, I'm short. I can swing with that.
I don't think you have to close it.
Oh, you don't? Okay, that sounds good. Everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Now hear this. Now hear this. I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm very grateful that Kelly has given me an opportunity to share something that at one day may be part of a book. I don't know. But anyway, here we are at another holiday, and I titled this, It's Holiday Time, Let the Insanity Begin. And as I go through this story, you'll realize why that title is so fitting. I grew up in a little burb outside of Cleveland, about 15 miles east of Cleveland, Ohio. My mother's name was Genevieve, which you don't hear too often anymore. She was a loving person who made most of our clothes. She always seemed to be washing clothes, hanging them on the basement lines or hanging them outside to dry. She always baked delicious cookies and incredible meals, most of which were entitled Jen's Mixture. If you asked her what's in there, she couldn't tell you a lot of things, but it was always good, and it gave me a chance to taste some things that I probably wouldn't have. Charlie was the male parent. Charlie worked 2 or 3 jobs at a time, and he paid our house off in 5 years. I didn't see much of Charlie during this time, except when he would come home to demean anyone in his path. I was usually the one in his path, and I was also the target of his violent temper. Over the years, I came to expect him to beat me with his belt until my back was welted. Sometimes he would use one of his work shoes or his fist. I tried so hard to be the son he wanted as his second born. I helped him tear cars apart, where we would leave the shell of the car out in the driveway and the motor and other parts in the garage. Today I can still feel the cold of the leaded gasoline on my hands as I washed car parts in the garage. Charlie would drink beer and smoke Camel non-filtered cigarettes with fumes from gasoline filling the garage. In the winter, he'd open the door a small crack for ventilation. His temperament changed like the hands of a clock, as the hours clicked into the night until 2 or 3 a.m. when we'd quit. We stayed up late, even on school nights. I was the second of 5 children: Pat, Donna, Mary, Carol, and Rita. Mary was born premature on February 1st. She died on the 2nd and was buried February 3rd. My mother never saw her, never touched her, and she never stopped grieving for her baby until the day she died in 2001. Later, my mother told me about a violent assault by Charlie while she was pregnant with Mary. Charlie punched my mother several times in her abdomen, very hard. A short time later, Mary was born, 3 months premature. her heart and lungs not completely developed. In another time, Charlie would have been charged with Mary's murder as he caused the premature birth. I've always felt Mary's presence with me, like an angel on my shoulder. I had a lot of reasons to love my mother. I had just as many to fear and hate Charlie. Sure, we had food on the table. We had a roof over our heads. But it came with a very steep price. As a child, I was always sick. I ran fevers that brought on delirium and hallucinations. My mother took care of me during the day, and when night came, Charlie would sleep with me. I hated the nights. He would wrap himself around me very closely. I would try to move from his embrace, and he would cling tighter. I could feel every part of him pressing on me. He worked as a tool and die maker, designing and making parts for cars, planes, and government projects. I hated the greasy, oily smell of the factory on him, which lingered even after he showered. He worked hard and never missed work, even when sick. I hated his rough hands. I began to hate him. Holidays were anxious times in our house. There were family get-togethers where alcohol was freely available. My mother was not a drinker. Her favorite beverage was coffee, by the potful. Charlie made up for the alcohol that my mother didn't drink. The fun of holiday celebrations would change as the alcohol levels rose. We went to see Charlie's brothers, who were always funny and nice. Charlie's mood would become angrier and unpredictable, especially on the way home. And once we arrived home, he was worse. He thought he hid his violence from his brothers and his sisters, but they all knew the truth. In his family, the eldest son was encouraged to beat up his sisters. I went to a state university in Ohio and lived in a dorm with one roommate. We were very supportive of each other and got along very well. Christmas was coming, and I was expected to come home for Christmas break. I dreaded the ride on the Greyhound bus. This time, a drunk man tried to sit next to me with his bottle and insisted on having a conversation with me. I had visions of Charlie in my head, except this guy really reeked of alcohol and body odor. I found myself yelling at him to leave me the fuck alone and get the fuck out of my space. I felt the anger rising in me. I wanted to punch his face, and then I wanted to kick him down the aisle. Years later, I realized my anger was rooted in my hatred of going home for the holidays with Charlie. When I arrived home via a 1963 Volkswagen Beetle, with Charlie driving like a madman, my younger sister asked if I could take her to the mall for a present she needed. We cleared the use of the car with Charlie and headed to the mall near our house. We left the mall empty-handed, and my sister suggested we go to another mall. It was raining and cold, and the heating system in a 1963 Beetle was poorly designed. The windows fogged up, the defroster was non-existent except for the dry cloths that we had to clear the window fog. We were on a familiar 4-lane highway when a car suddenly crossed 3 lanes and careened into the driver's side quarter panel, coming 2 inches shy of coming through the driver's door. The driver of the other car claimed she didn't see us. I called the police, and then I called Charlie. It was like calling Lucifer. He ranted and screamed and raved because we were headed to another mall when we told him we were just going to go to one. When he arrived on site to pick us up, my sister and I both knew there would be hell to pay when we got home. We walked into the house and all hell did break loose. This was the scariest I'd ever seen him. He was strong and terrifying. He screamed and yelled at me, took his belt off, and began beating me. He was viciously slamming the belt into me. With every stroke of the belt, I felt my back welting and bleeding. He grabbed me and pinned me behind the kitchen door, where I fell to the ground, crying, screaming in pain, pleading with him to stop. He began kicking me with his steel-toed shoes. He kept kicking my head and my spine. It was brutal. He called me everything but his daughter as he beat me. Suddenly, he left the kitchen and opened the inside front door of the house, shouting and cursing at the screen door window. In the kitchen, I tried to revive my sister who had passed out. Hearing his rant continue, I grabbed the kitchen door and yelled, "Dad, shut the fuck up," as I slammed the door closed. Charlie came through the door like a freight train. He grabbed me, cold-cocked me, and backed me over the edge of the kitchen sink. I saw his mouth moving. I felt his hands crushing my trachea, and suddenly I was blacking out. I thought, he's going to kill me. I'm going to die. I was having trouble breathing and going in and out of consciousness. And inside my head, I knew I couldn't wait for him to stop because he wasn't going to stop. I gathered all my strength and was able to knee him in the groin so hard his balls were hanging on his ears. The litany of Charlie started calling me things I never knew existed. He was in pain from the kick and cursed me as he left the kitchen. As I caught my breath, I walked to the door and said, "If you ever lay another hand on me, I will kill you. You will never try to kill me again." The rest of Christmas break was a blur. When I returned to school, I hid what happened. One day I was changing my shirt in the dorm room. My roommate saw my back and asked, "What the hell happened to you?" My response was an abused person's response. "Oh, I fell down some stairs at home." Years later, I claimed Pat Benatar's song, "Hell is for Children," as my rallying cry to never go into that dark hole again. Charlie never touched me again. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 56. He died at 62. I made a promise to myself that I would never raise a hand against anyone unless it was self-defense. I also promised I would never allow anyone to abuse me. Thank you very much.
All right, keep it going for Donna, everyone. Fuck Charlie, that fucking fucking shit. Yeah, fuck Charlie. I like the part where you threatened to kill him, Donna. I feel like there should be a part of that. Maybe not every queer memoir story should have a death thing, but I don't know. What do I know? My favorite song is Goodbye Earl, so, you know. You know, there's actually, no, I'm not going to go into that. But thank you, Donna. Thank you so much for sharing that story, which I'm sure was not easy to share. Appreciate it. And, yeah, and we're really glad you're still with us. All right, so I believe this is clean now, even though I'm still touching it. So, our next storyteller coming to the stage, I'm really excited. You know, if you haven't attended Queer Memoir before, we do things a little bit, it's not regularly like a regular storytelling show. We introduce people just by first name. We don't do a lot of bios, either before or after people speak. We're trying to let folks' stories kind of stand by themselves. So I'll maybe talk a little bit about Tyler after Tyler speaks, but I'm just really happy to bring to the Queer Memoir stage, Tyler.
I'm taller than Donna. There we go. Yeah. Maybe a little more. I'm taller than I thought. All right. Hello, I'm so glad to be here. Actually, I will just grab it. So I was thinking about this prompt and what it kind of means to be queer during the holidays and what that looks like. And I don't just think about Christmas and Thanksgiving, although those are very like bring someone home holidays, right? But I think about sort of all the things that kind of come together, especially if you're dealing with familial homophobia. It can become most apparent when you're trying to maybe bring a queer partner home or friends to celebrate with, some people you enjoy being with outside of your immediate family. But I also think about birthdays and the awkward reflection on days like Mother's Day and Father's Day and how transactional some of that love can feel. And you just wonder, you know, what do I do for those days when I'm supposed to, you know, celebrate my parents, but I still feel very distant from them. And I remember the first time my parents ever met my now husband, he actually threw me a birthday party for my 29th birthday, which was weird because I was in this relationship routine where I would like date someone for 6 months and they would break up with me, which is fine. Like, I'm not for everybody, but like, so that 6-month mark was coming up, and instead of breaking up with me, he was like, I'm gonna throw you a birthday party. And I was like, this isn't in the script, but okay. And I was wondering if I would invite my parents, because I traditionally did not invite them to things with queer people for their own safety as well as mine, right? I didn't want that kind of energy there. And I remember like 2 weeks before the birthday party, and DJ was like, oh, you should really invite your parents. And I'm like, that's a big ask. I don't know if you know that. But and so my dad would come over occasionally. He was the only one who really maintained our relationship after I came out. My mom would kind of acknowledge me when we were there in person, when I was there in person, but not, she wouldn't call me. She wouldn't have any kind of connection with me. Actually, a few Mother's Days after that one, I actually sent her an email and I was like, do you want to be my mom? And she was like, let me get back to you. But that's another story. That's another story. It's kind of funny because she came back with the same stuff my dad had said that was like super homophobic and gross. And I was like, it's been 8 years and you put zero thought into this shit? Really? But like, anyway, so I'm having this pizza in my tiny apartment in the Houston neighborhood with my dad. And we're sitting on my couch and he's just like, I'm really worried about you. And I'm like, why? He's like, well, you don't have any friends. And I said, and in my brain, I'm like, well, I don't introduce you to my friends. And then I was like, but I made my decision in that moment because I was like, well, F this. Come to my birthday party, Dad. You and Mom, come to my 29th birthday party that my boyfriend's having. And that might have been the first time they'd heard of him. I don't know. I was like, so my boyfriend's throwing me a birthday party with like 50 of my friends. You should come. I was just like, F it, Let's just do it. And I go to a very affirming church in the neighborhood, and I have a very multi-generational group of LGBTQ folks. I have friends, and that are my age as well, and they all just came to my birthday party at another friend's house that was bigger than mine, and we all had a good time. My dad hung out in the kitchen with DJ most of the time, and then my mom didn't know DJ was my boyfriend, but he handed her a glass of wine, and then I told her later, oh, that's my boyfriend. Never talked to him for the rest of the night. But my dad was in the kitchen the whole time talking his ear off. Again, different strategy. The parents dealing with it in different ways, and that's their issue, right? And then, so that went pretty well, and I was like, never had that conversation about no friends with my parents again. So that was a solution there, right? And then DJ is a chef, worked at a restaurant. He wasn't able to come to the bigger holidays like Christmas or Thanksgiving, so I would go. But I told him, I was like, just make something and I will bring it, and I will say, oh, DJ made this for us for this holiday, so that I could actually talk about him, because I knew that they wouldn't bring him up on their own. I knew that if I didn't talk about him, no one would. And I have 2 straight brothers, and they have wives and families and all this stuff. And it's so weird to me to see how they're treated, how they're respected, how you can, they actually get more excited when they have kids, which is receipts, honestly. That kid came from somewhere, and you're excited about it, which is great. But me having a boyfriend is a problem. And so I would talk about him when I went. He would make dishes or whatever. And then when it finally came around to he was able to go, they invited us both to Thanksgiving. And I was like, great, wonderful. And I had already set some boundaries at this point, and I was like, just so you know, no special caveats for my family that you wouldn't offer the other family members. And then 2 days before Thanksgiving that year, my dad's like, I want to come down and have dinner with you. And I was like, oh, did you want to talk about something? He's like, no, I just want to have dinner. I was like, okay. And again, we do this occasionally. So we go have dinner, and at the end of the dinner, before we leave, he's like, yeah, your older brother's a little uncomfortable, so introduce DJ as your friend around the kids. And I'm like, and in the moment, I don't know how to process that, right? And it feels like such a betrayal to be like, oh, I don't want to talk about anything important, but by the way, lie to your family members about your boyfriend, just so the kids don't get any of that queer stuff, right? And eventually I do send it to, and then it's my brother's issue, but my dad's getting on the soapbox for him, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But so eventually I'm like, you know what, we're not gonna come, we have other plans. When you're ready to have us over, let us know, and you know what to do. So we do our own thing, and then Christmas we run off to London to get away from everybody, and that was so nice to do. And then July 4th is a big, and that same time is when I sent that email to my mom, do you want to be my mom? And she responded back with the same stuff for the last 8 years or so. And I honestly laughed when I read it. I was like, again, no thought, no insight at all in these years. She's just parroting the party line or whatever. And then I sent her an email back that was very much you want to know what's hard? Here's what it was like growing up in your house as a gay child. And I just laid it out, and I said, and you know what? I worked as a pharmacy technician, so if I really wanted to do something to myself, it would have been so easy to do. And you put me in a position where I got really close. Really close. And and she's never responded to that email. My dad's never responded to that email. But I know they read it because when July 4th rolled around right before, my dad called with tears in his voice and he was like, y'all should come to July 4th. And I was like, okay, I could hear it. Something's changed. So we come to July 4th. He's available. We're all available. We bring a bottle of wine. We have a nice dinner. My husband, who is a chef, who also knows how to season things and is not white, put like milk and seasoning in the corn they boiled. And my family was like, what did he do to this? He's like, and they're like, he's like, I put buttermilk in it and like seasoning. And they're like, wow. And I'm like the same way because he'll make vegetables and put like salt and pepper and lemon on them. And I'm like, these are amazing. What'd you do? And he's like, salt and pepper and lemon. But so we went, we had a good time. We ate food. Nothing untoward happened. And then in August, my dad calls me up and he's like, hey, I really need to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, is it important? He's like, no, I just want to talk to you. I'm like, okay. And I should have known better by this point, right? So we meet in the park by my house. And this is like maybe a month or a little over after we got done with the July 4th thing. Again, nothing happened. We weren't like making out on the couch or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, totally. But we were very like genteel when we went. And then we meet in the park by my apartment. And he's just like, you know what? That was hard. And I'm like, what was hard? And he was like, well, y'all coming over. And I was just like, well, what happened? He's like, well, it's hard for your mom. And I'm like, okay, that's her problem. And he's like, well, if it's hard for her, it's hard for me. And I'm like, okay, that's your problem. And I'm just like, and then he went through the whole list of everybody who was concerned or worried but me. Like, I'm not in that consideration at all. And eventually I was just like, you know what, Dad? I'm your son too. And you have to show up for and you have to show up for me. So I just put it out there and I said, basically, I'm your son. You show up for your other sons, and you show up for them because they're straight. I'm not straight. I'm not going anywhere, though. So you need to learn to show up for me. And if you can't do that, you don't need to be my father. And it was a really hard conversation to have, but it was this culmination of all these microaggressions during holidays and other days where I wasn't given the same consideration because I wasn't straight. And he could show up for them, but he couldn't show up for me. So when I think of holidays and being queer, I think about that. And things have gotten better, but again, there's so much shame for them in their actions. They've never actually addressed it, but they have shown up more and not given those kinds of ridiculous ideas around how I should be around the holidays or whatever. But I just want to encourage you, if you are queer and you're having issues with family and they're being unreasonable, which the situations I described are very much unreasonable, that you are their child and they chose to have you and be your parent, and that is their responsibility, regardless of how you express who you are. Whether you're queer, disabled, whatever it is, like, they chose you. And that's how it should always be. And don't let them make you feel like you have to choose, because they chose you first. All right? Thank you.
Keep it going for Tyler, everyone. Thank you so much. Let's keep it going for the storytellers, which is me asking the storytellers to applaud each other. But yeah, let's keep it going for all the storytellers. So the reason we're specifically doing a live stream is because the COVID numbers are so high in New York City, and Caveat canceled their live shows, but is being gracious enough to let us do a live stream. There were 3 folks that were more comfortable with doing a video, so there's 3 videos interspersed today. So there's going to be 2 right in a row right now. The first one will be from Andrew, and then the second one will be from Kay.
First off, I want to say thank you to Kelly for having me on Queer Memoirs. I'm truly honored to be here. I work at Caveat, so I've seen plenty of these shows, and they're always very refreshing and heartwarming and heartbreaking. And as a queer person, I'm always happy to work this show, and it's an honor to now be performing on it. I am a comedian. I'm a vulnerable comedian at that, but I will say that I'm going to be more vulnerable today than I'm even used to, so I will say that I am nervous. Woo! And I'll just imagine that I can hear you cheering just the same way that I'm imagining that this mic is, somehow connected to something. It's just a prop to make me feel more comfortable. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about Christmas 2019, but a little bit of backstory on my, sort of queer journey. I started off the pandemic thinking a lot of other people will come out as non-binary, only to find out that I'm a size 14 and be like, I think maybe I'm coming out as non-binary. Ah, yes. It turns out I might be a trans femme, they, them. Ooh, feels good, looks good. Honestly, look at me. You guys can't quite see my skirt, but I'll give you a little, there it is. Okay, just for fun. I've been trying to trace the roots of my trans identity. When I was 10, I dressed up as a cheerleader for Halloween, and there's photos of it. But more recently, I would say my roots trace back to 2018. At the time, I was dating a straight cis woman, and I knew I was bi, but I had never actually practiced my bisexuality. And she very graciously allowed me to open up the relationship so that I could, go on dates with men, suck their dicks, and see how that makes me feel. But at the time, I wasn't really going out with men that much as I was going out with trans and non-binary people. I dated a trans dude for 2 months, and he was hot. I'd go over to his place, and before we'd hook up, he'd throw on a horror movie and be like, I'm really into body horror because I'm trans. And that was hot. So I guess at the time, I was coming out as bi, but I was almost immediately realizing that I was probably more pansexual. But anyway, Christmas 2019, I'm dating a straight cis woman. Our relationship is basically on the rocks. We very much were in love with each other, but it wasn't working out. Over the course of that year, we had broken up, gotten back together, broken up again, start seeing other people, get back together, stop seeing the people we were seeing, and then shortly after start seeing people again, and then I'd go home to meet her family for Thanksgiving or something like that. And it was just it was a lot of fighting. It was not a good year for either of us. And it all kind of culminated in this big fight towards the end of the year, because I was putting on a show called Winter Baby, and the costume for Winter Baby was this big white robe with a long white wig, and the fight was that I wanted to show her my costume, and I was really excited to show her, and I brought her into our living room because we lived together, and I had her turn around and close her eyes, and then I put on the costume, the long white wig, and the long white robe, and I'm really excited. I'm just turn around, look at this costume, and she turns around and she pauses, and her mouth is dropped and her eyes are wide, and she's no comment. And I was like, no comment, what the fuck? You don't love this? And then she's like, Andrew, I knew you were struggling with your sexuality. I didn't realize you were struggling with your gender. And you know, fine, that's a point blank question. I did hear disdain in her voice, and it did upset me quite a bit. We got into a big fight, and I like spiraled. And like the fight ended with her saying that she just doesn't think she's queer enough for me, which I internalized as I'm too queer for you. And then the next day I went home for Christmas by myself. I went to Virginia to see my family, and I was very upset. And like my home life wasn't really good at the time. Like my mom's fiance had passed away that year, and she sold her house, so she was living with my aunt. And there's no locked doors in the room I was staying in, so like there's 4-year-olds coming in slapping my face while I'm sleeping, and I'm just like numb. Like I'm normally numb around the holidays, but like I was exceptionally numb this year. And the big theme of the holidays that like, and like I guess like I always hate the holidays for this reason, but like I exceptionally hated it during 2019, which is that like nobody in my family notices me at all. Like, I feel completely ignored, you know, like, forget that they don't, you know, like, I just come out as bi, nobody was talking to me about it, I'm still closeted trans, and like, I was very depressed and numb, and, like, I just felt like nobody saw me, like, nobody really wanted me, you know, like, they want my body to be in photos for fondue night, but, like, they don't want me, the Andrew Coalson, who I am, to actually be there. You know, and like, I just felt unseen. And similarly in my relationship, you know, I felt like she loved me, she wanted to be with me, but she didn't actually want me, Andrew, this queer person. You know, and so like, I was just feeling very unwanted and very unseen. And I just can't go through the motions of the holidays when I feel like that. And eventually my mom did notice me. You know, like the holidays are very busy, but there's usually a break on Christmas Day when my brothers go to see my dad and I do not because we're estranged. And so it was during this time that my mom called me up to her room and we laid in her bed and she acknowledged that she noticed I was depressed and we talked about it. And I unloaded everything on her about the breakup, about the gender stuff, and just how like I just don't feel like it's working anymore and I feel like I'm on my last leg, and how I feel like I just like can't be home for the holidays, like I can't go through these motions, I can't be a body in a photo, you know, like I would rather come home when everybody's just like living their lives, like coming home from work and school, like that's a time when I can be around my family, but not during the holidays, because the holidays are just like a straight pride parade from Thanksgiving to Christmas of just like, look at my engagement ring, look at my baby, look at this, look at that, you know, like, and it's just like, we celebrate straight love, but we don't acknowledge the queer people in this house, aka me. So I end up getting the midnight bus back to New York on Christmas night. And I arrived the day after Christmas at 6 a.m. in New York City. And I swear to God this happened. I'm riding on the train ride home. I live on an elevated train. And we can see the sun setting, or the sun rising, because it's 6 in the morning. So the sun is rising. And I'm on my phone, I'm pretty sure like I'm swiping on Tinder or Grindr or something, because all of a sudden this guy starts yelling at my face. He just starts going, I'm gonna fucking kill you. I'm gonna stab you in the neck, faggot. I'm gonna kill you. Don't look at me, faggot. You know, like, just like all of that stuff. And it was right before my stop. Like, swear to God, right before my stop. So like, I get my bags, I get off the train, you know, and then I walk home. I put my bags down, I lie in bed, and you know, like, and I stay there in the quiet of my apartment for the rest of the day, and say to myself, this is better. This is my Christmas. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Ulanday Barrett, and my pronouns are he, they, and sha. Currently, I'm located on the unceded and occupied territory of the Lenape, Hoking, and Munsee peoples in New York and New Jersey. I'm an award-winning poet, essayist, cultural strategist, as well as A+ snapper. For our accessibility needs, a description: I'm a brown round queer with glasses as well as a gray hat. I wear a blue chambray collared shirt and a black t-shirt. Behind me is a white wall, a lamp, many plants, and part of a bike tire. So yeah, Kelly invited me, and Kelly knows that all my family's dead. So the holidays can get really tricky. And on top of that, my mom's birthday lands the day before usually, or the week of Thanksgiving. So it just, grieving has always just kicked off with understanding death. So here I am. The holidays suck. Yeah. But as a queer person, we invite and invigorate new practices and rituals. And yeah, part of that for me is writing and remembering. So here's an untitled piece written on November 22nd, 2018. To the glory and guts of my mother, Cecilia Ulanday Barrett, who would have been 74 on this day. 1. We have few things in common, you and I. I wonder if you get angry like your homeland, lumped up with by other colonizers, made to oversimplify when we speak different languages entirely. 2. I'm the age you were when you had me, 37. Doctors told you it was impossible for you to have children to carry. And since then, you joked in mockery and in pride. You were always impossible, nah? Everything you are. You're not even supposed to be here. And you still survived anyway. And like that was the destiny you prayed for both of us. Like, that's actually what you loved and also hated about me all along. 3. Your birthday lands on Thanksgiving, and the irony is way too obvious. How you were forced here, how you got sick by the seedy kindness of white people, how we're all supposed to be so damned grateful and thankful, even though annihilation is annihilation, and in this country, some of us never make it. 4. Your favorite movies are The Best of the Best and Beaches with the incomparable, wonderful Bette Midler. And sometimes I think that both of those movies really made me gay. Both movies were cinematic gems with very high stakes. Both were chock full of fight scenes, different kinds, with decent choreography. And so, life is complicated and truthful, as you undeniably were the best person on the dance floor for the first brawl. And those movies made sense, because you would scrap knuckle to knuckle with anybody if they looked at you sideways. #Scorpio charm. 5. I don't really clean on this day. I make sure the house or home I'm in is spotless, so there's no work to be done. Nobody lifts a finger, so the world is pristine without the barking of bosses or the wiping up of other people's messes. That's the life you deserved. 6. I'm sorry the world never believed you or believed in you. How, from the medical complex to this state, each doubted your magic, made your life less than it should have been. Now, with the pandemic, I fear that so many people like you, like me, just aren't being listened to. That's still part of the holidays, right? The genocide part? 7. When the holidays started in our house when I was little, poinsettias lined the wall of every place we lived. The open window of Mackinac City facing nothing but the woods, or the Albany Park basement we made home after the divorce. You made sure the holidays were a production, which kind of felt gay too for me as a kid. A tree, far too tall or too wide for the square footage of our house. Electric figurines of angels and Santa Claus waving with their still eyes, their still freaky, frozen smiles. Lights in every corner. We might have made this place less than 800 square feet glow like it was some big city that we could never really afford. You with your Nat King Cole and Patsy Cline Christmas albums, and me with Boys to Men and later Mariah Carey, of course. Christmas carols were the soundtrack to breakfast, to afternoon reading, to making sandwiches for your graveyard shifts as you waited out at the bus stop in 7 inches of snow. Just you and me and Christmas songs to make the harsh Midwest believe that it's below zero wind chills could be tolerable while my father was away, while you had a divorce, while you still missed back home. On holiday, the actual holiday when we'd eat, you'd make the best turkey and the best pancit, hands down. A culinary code switch, as all 6 to 8 courses were piping hot and made with the same spatula. We ladled unctuous gravy from roast chicken, joyfully tasted the brown sugar crisp from honey-baked ham, and broke open buttery bibinka with warm cheese atop on banana leaf, just as beautiful and gracious as a cloudy horizon. 8. By evening, everyone would be napping or already left, and you'd be alone, Sharon Cuneta or Nora Honor wailing ballads I never really understood. You scrubbing pans, tears streaming down your cheeks, and you'd say, I miss home. I miss home. By age 12, before your body collapsed, I would hold your hand, walk you to the creaky bed in the basement like an urge, an oath, promise, "Hoy, I'll clean this up." Shaking your puffy face, "No, Anuk, that's my job, nah." And I, in soft rebellion, would say, "Not today. Not today, Mama. I'll take care of it." Wishing I could say that every day, not just when a table is towered with dishes, a sink overflowing of used pots and pans. That meant you clean up the dirt of strangers. Meant every day you'd want to tidy me up with my sloppy queerness. Meant if something was perfectly scrubbed, maybe you could feel some control over this plot twist of an American dream. This languid nightmare of you, hours away from where you laughed most. Maybe you wouldn't feel like we were both a purge to this place. Not today. I would assert again, and eventually you'd give in. Eventually. 9. Despite your own stubborn self for this selfish empire, you'd attempt to rest, even if it's not what you meant to do. Even if I had to slowly clean up every stain, every paper trail, every disheveled blank stare, every barren building of a body. 10. Ask me what it was like to love you on the holidays. And I'll just murmur to myself as the record player still spins Patsy Cline or Nat King Cole on any December day. That's how we live in the diaspora. It's the way of my kind. How migrants and their children can't help it. It isn't a seasonal thing. We simply become our own disaster relief. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you so much, Queer Memoir. If you're interested in buying my book, it's More Than Organ, and you can find me on social media at Brown Round Boy, BOI.
Keep it going for Kay. I don't know for sure if Kay is in the comments on the YouTube link, but I'll also put in links to Kay's books and stuff, and other folks. There's also bio information on the Facebook event for folks to check out everyone's work and what folks are up to. How's everyone doing?
Pretty good.
All right. So, yeah. Kay said, Kay texted, we were having tech problems, and Kay texted and said, Yeah, I might have cried in my piece, and I was like, that's queer memoir. That's fine. That's what we're about. Yeah. You know, I once had somebody that was like, I was running a workshop called Making Comedy from Tragedy. And the person like later came to the workshop and later was like, why did you talk about tragedy so much? And I was like, it was kind of in the name. So I feel like the tragic comic is kind of my den. So this always just like makes me feel very warm and fuzzy towards everybody. So I appreciate everyone's great vulnerability and loveliness. And for Kay for sharing a perspective that, is an important voice. So many important voices and important stories tonight. Okay, it's not night, it's actually 4 p.m., but we're in a basement, so it seems really late, and because I got up at 5 a.m. to get a booster shot. So the next person I'm going to bring to the stage is Michael.
I'm going to try this. Hi. Thank you so much. I applied for this, and Kelly accepted me, so I was so excited because I love to talk about Santa. Also, I'm writing an epic poem. It's a drama poem. It's a choreo poem. I used to be a dancer. I'm doing a lot with it. It involves monologue, sort of, and poetry. I'm going to read a portion of that. But I wanted to connect this piece. And by the way, I'm going to read the first part, and please stay with me. I'm always worried about flow because I actually just wrote it. I have a lot of ideas for this piece, so I was rewriting, and I had to make a decision and just stop. But it means a lot to me to be able to speak to Santa and to you from my heart as Santa. And you'll hear about it, but I love connecting it to the other piece, and so that motivation by being here. As a person who's been a performer, I always feel like being put on the spot in front of people was always the best way for me to get, even though I can still write without that impetus, it makes an absolute for me. So it brings me I have to do this. So I'm going to read from scribbled pen writing. My Santa that I was a secret wisher as a child. A secret wisher means a person who knows that wishing is not really allowed, even as a child. You keep it in a place inside my head, something I just rediscovered in middle age. It's a holiday in my head, always happening here. The landscape of the mind, and that works so effortlessly that you become a subject to it. All the candy canes of the past stuck here and becoming a part of my mind, and they're still there, even later in my life. I have no will to change. I never have, only to become something greater. I allow my imagination to take flight as it was never acknowledged in my childhood. I love Santa with the same dedication that others had for Jesus. Christmas was not about Jesus. It was about Santa, always. I imagined him as a mentor or a more advanced version of myself, the man I really wanted to be. At that point, I could not see myself as old. I could only wait to see if one day Santa would come and grant me my real wish to appoint me as his apprentice. I started writing. I wrote to Santa in July. I wrote to him every day in December, even in January. I needed to grab his attention because this is what I truly wanted to be, the next Santa. I never had to practice the giving part. I found absolute joy in any process of giving. I cherished every bit of the broken outdoor lights my family had assembled and blazed on the porch. My favorite was the bells that flashed primary colors. Not unique to the outside world, but unique to me. We had a single reindeer and he worked it. He stayed lit, brightly lit, and even survived the worst, upstate New York winter storm. He laid there in deep layers of snow dust and gave shape to the white spray particles that plastic deer made them magic in my mind. I had something to stare at instead of the television. We had only 3 channels, and it never gave me hope. Because everything in the household seemed to shut down whenever we had it on. I could always count on a tree, a real tree. I hoped for a blue spruce every year because of the combination of the hues and the potent smell. As the young child, I had 2 worlds, Santa and the other. I call that something coming. And it started in my dreams. I had a dream that night. I saw you in the waves. I prayed for them to release you, but my prayer hands didn't work, and my arms opened instead, and I started to fly. I saw our classmates from school under my wings. A draft appeared. "That's a girl butterfly," the boy said. "I'll get it." He lunged for me. I could not speak back. He grabbed me. I cringed. I would be crushed. I could hear their adult thoughts. The butterfly is a woman. They prefer to be beautiful, and men prefer to be static. Butterflies cannot walk and salute. If they do, they will be brought down and crushed, rebuilt, trained for our world. I could hear conflicting thoughts, but finally the boy's thoughts said, "You will be brought to earth where you will be conditioned. We have a place to put you." I am gone to any feeling as I try to cope with the stasis. I see the future, where mine is the body that creates future calamities that I've now avoided. I resist them. I fly up. Men raise their arms. Some shake their fists. Others raise guns. These soldiers have thin arms that wobble, but their aim is exact. They know what they hate. Men with a feminine pallor, men with a gentle smile, men who are captivating in the most discreet sense. As I am watching the scenario unfolds, soldiers shoot me, my wings come apart, and I fall faster than expected. They're breaking apart, and I continue to suppress a dry cough. I think, why do I care about coughing anymore? And I fall as one butterfly through a broken mass of migrating butterflies. These men are on this journey. They catch me and carry me forward. Our duration is eternal, and knowing that is our escape of earthbound being. Our innate wisdom grows, butterflying, buckling through blinding wind. The future voices that I hear are the sounds of suffering. I'm hearing the knocks, the restless knocks of the ordained as they recaptured their efforts. They will never cease. They are captivated by echoes. They do not realize I am here, that I am listening to every single one. Thank you.
Keep it going for Michael, everyone. Everyone, all 5 of y'all. Or in the comments on YouTube. Okay, so thank you so much, Michael. And also this perfect example of, so there's a pitch form. It's on, I will put it in the link. We're always looking for storytellers, and if you are not an experienced storyteller, we will work with you. We do workshops, and I do one-on-one coaching, and also if you're just like, I'd like to do storytelling, but I don't like Kelly Dunham, you can, I also have other people that can coach, in case that is part of the problem. I mean, I hope that's not part of it, but I always feel like, maybe like my style is not somebody else's style. So, all right, so I'm just gonna do something quickly before we bring up our last storytellers. So, you wanna see what made my therapist actually guffaw this week in therapy? Sure. Yeah, more, I need more than that. Do you wanna see? Okay, thank you, all right, okay. All right, so this is Freak of Nurture, and it's being, I'm currently, it was issued. I don't know, like Scrim or something in the Civil War. I don't know. It was published in 2013 by Topside Press, and I'm rewriting it for a Spanish press that wants to publish it, the unfortunately named Blackie Books. Anyway, it's due at the end. I think it might be better in Spanish. Anyway, so it's due at the end of the year, and so I'm like rewriting something that I wrote 8 years ago. And realizing that I was just bananas when I wrote this book. It was like shortly after Cheryl died, and I was just like, and also I'd just kind of come through some stuff with my mom. Anyway, the first line of this book is, I did not have an unhappy childhood. It's like one of those internet memes, like nobody, and then like, I didn't have an unhappy childhood. I did not have an unhappy childhood. I didn't have an unhappy childhood. I did not have an unhappy childhood. And my therapist was like, that nobody with a happy childhood would ever start a book by saying they had a happy childhood. You know that, right? And I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know. And the hilarious thing is, I did not tell my mom about this book. We were not Facebook friends when this book came out. It was published by a small, like, queer trans press. So I never mentioned it to her. When I went to her house for Christmas, the next year it was sitting on her bookshelf. But it was a paperback, and it clearly the binding had never been broken. So my mom had she just read the first line and I guess was satisfied. She's like, oh, okay, all right, that's fine. Anyway, so I guess that's good. And so there's some stories that are gonna go in this version of the book that, my mom's dead. I can write whatever the fuck I want now. So, I know I feel like I'm in my celebration of my mom's death. This is the second month in a row. Anyway, so I wrote this piece called Arrive Alive, The Fine Art of Family Holiday Survival. This piece was actually excerpted in a book that it was called Dangerous Families, and I thought it was like a funny book about families. And then when I got the anthology back, it was Dangerous Families, quote, or colon, queers on surviving child abuse. So that's how I accidentally ended up in a child abuse anthology. There will not be that kind of, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just gonna talk about something very briefly. So I have this thing that's just like some tips on surviving holidays with your family. And so, things like, don't come out for the first time at the dinner table. You might get stabbed with a fork, that kind of thing. You can also, if you don't want to answer questions, you can also feign intestinal orders that require constant trips to the bathroom. This is a fail-safe way of avoiding troublesome, boring, or even insulting topics of conversation. For example, many years, every time my family gathered, my grandmother liked to tell the story about how lucky she was to have survived her bout with cancer, since the disease was caught at such a late stage. I didn't go to the doctor right away about the pain in the side, my grandma would explain, because I thought I was just sore from carrying Kelly around. She was such a big fat baby. Silence. Hey, my grandma would say, where's Kelly? Flush. You get the picture. Anyway. Okay. Also important to anticipate the end of a conversation before you initiate it. One year I asked the Colonel, which is my mom's husband at the time, he would sign things TC for the Colonel. Everyone called him the Colonel. I asked him over pumpkin pie if the bayonets mounted on the living room wall were real. For Christ's sake, yes, he'd exclaim. What good is a bayonet if it's never been used to kill anyone? I learned something very important that day. If you can't handle the answer, don't ask the question. Okay, so Then another tip is work with the family denial system, not against it. Remember what you learned from the friendly neighborhood dike lifeguard? If you're caught in a riptide, don't try to swim out of it. The riptide is always stronger than you are, and you'll tire yourself out before you get back to the beach. Swim parallel to a riptide. At some point, a feature on the shore will cause its strength to ebb, and you will be able to break away. The same principle applies when dealing with what could be called a reduced truth family situation. Some may call it a sideways confrontation passive-aggressive, but I call it efficient. Okay, so here's an example. My mom had a tubal ligation 19 months before I was born. In the 60s, the tubal ligation procedure involved only the clamping, that's actually cutting, only the clamping of the fallopian tubes rather than actually severing them. My brother, who thought I was aware of this, mentioned it at a Christmas gathering the year I turned 30, and then I did some quick internet research. According to a CDC report done over a 10-year period from 65 until 73, out of the 365 post-tubal ligation women the CDC studied, 143 became pregnant at least once after the procedure. In other words, 1 in 155 at that time, tubal ligations were unsuccessful. It seems strange that my mother had never mentioned, and some people had had as many three babies after their tubal ligations. That had to be a very angry mother. It seems strange my mom had never mentioned my, special status as a 1 in 155er. We weren't a timid clan by any stretch of the imagination. One of the explicitly stated family rules was, remember kids, we don't give each other the finger in front of grandma. My biological father was of the genre of dads that thought great fun on the road was, farting and then locking the windows of the station wagon. So, why were they so quiet about this? I decided to chat with my mom about this. The day after Christmas, I accompanied her on the early morning drive to pick up donuts for all the visiting relatives. I had only managed to say, Mom, you could have told me about the tubal ligation, before my mom turned the steering wheel sharply to the right while simultaneously hitting the brakes. This sent the car skidding onto the gravel shoulder. I can't believe how close that car came to hitting us. She was genuinely breathless. It was 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and we were driving on a deserted stretch of highway in rural Florida. There was no traffic for miles. I nodded and agreed that, indeed, who could believe how close that car came to hitting us? I can guess my mom's motivation for not wanting me to know that she tried so hard for me to prevent my birth. She was worried that if I knew the truth, it would shatter my self-esteem. On the contrary, knowing the truth resolved a lot of questions I had, notably, what the hell were they doing having one more kid? Also, knowing that I was the direct result of a super fierce-ass egg fighting its way through a banded fallopian tube filled me with this indescribable joy. It's like being born with a protest sign in my hand. I am here. I am queer. Guess you're all going to have to get used to it. All the same, I couldn't resist tormenting my mother about this absurd situation. The next Christmas, I got my mom a special gift, a T-shirt I had sent to her house directly from the Planned Parenthood website. It was adorned with a picture of a smiling cartoon uterus and said simply, "Ask me about my tubal ligation." See, navigate within the confines of the family denial system, not against it. I'd like to bring our next storyteller to the stage, and that is Calvin. Woohoo, Calvin!
Okay. Hello, everybody. Woo, this is so lovely, and I know this is redundant and everyone else has said it as well, but Kelly, sincerely, thank you so much for keeping this going and having this as a live stream. I just feel like, especially during the holidays, it's just always super important to hear, queer people get to tell their stories. And yesterday I did a show, Dre Campbell, who is another wonderful storyteller, she did a storytelling show that was also on Zoom that was supposed to be canceled, and I was glad that she did that as well. So, yay gays! So this story takes place in winter of 2013, and if you knew me back then and you saw posts on social media, you would think that I had it all. Like I had a boyfriend, and I had a good job, and I had my own apartment with no roommates in New York City, which is crazy, because if anyone lives in New York City, you understand that it is next to impossible to get an apartment by yourself without having sort of fishnets on the side. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's very difficult. But I managed to do it, and I was doing a lot of stand-up comedy at the time, and I was performing 5 to 6 nights a week. And people were like, wow, that's so amazing. Like, you have it all. But what people didn't understand was that there was a lot of shittiness going on behind the scenes. Like, I did have this good job, but the job I worked in was in an all-white office, which, if for any viewers at home or the one minority I saw in this room understands, is that if you work with white people, you have to deal with a lot of microaggressions that they think are funny, and you have to pretend like it's funny. You know, like, it's like always things like, oh, I went on vacation, I'm gonna be as dark as you, and you're just like, ah ha ha ha, casual racism, and like pretend that that's okay. Or it's things where it's like, you'll be at a water cooler and it's like, oh my God, can we talk about Glee or talk about Friends or talk about Seinfeld? And I'd be like, did no one watch Living Single? Like, why are we still talking about white shows from 10 years ago? Who gives a shit? But you have to do that and pretend. And stand-up comedy is another place where it's a very white space where you have to put up with a lot of racism. And I would get on shows, but I was frequently the only black person or the only queer person, or in a lot of cases, the only one of both of those things. And so you get introduced on stage, you're like, he's black and he's gay. We did it, guys. We solved racism, Calvin Cato. And it would be things like that would happen all the time. And you'd be forced to just laugh or smile or be like, oh, you know, whatever, it's fine. It's just professionalism. But it's not. It's not okay. And the apartment I lived in was a studio apartment where the bathroom was so close to the kitchen, you could literally shit where you eat. So it was not going well, but it looked like I was going well. Things looked like they were going well. And I had a boyfriend at the time, and it became a long-distance relationship, not by my decision. And because it was a long-distance relationship, there was a lot of emphasis on how distant we were becoming. So this all culminates into winter of 2013. And what I always did, again, because working in an all-white office, I just needed space for myself, is I would always take off from Christmas Eve to New Year's Day, and I wouldn't work. I would not check work emails. I wouldn't do shows. I just wanted to sit at home and do black shit. Like, I just wanted to sit at home and just moisturize and watch Love Jones and Love and Basketball and play Sonic the Hedgehog. In case you don't know, Sonic the Hedgehog is black. He's a fast runner. He's black. So that's the thing I would do. Because I was like, I just needed to decompress from all the whiteness in my life. And I realized that I took all this time off, but I wasn't able to leave the house and do things. And at first I thought it was just because I was tired. Like, I was like, you know, I worked a lot, and I do a lot of shows, and I do a lot of 9 to 5, and then work from 5 to 11. Like, I was just tired. And I was able to drag myself out to go see my parents for a Christmas dinner. And my parents are immigrant parents, so everything is passive-aggressive. They have no contemplation about my lifestyle choices at all. And so it was an unhappy dinner, and I went back home, and I just stayed at home, and I couldn't really do anything. And then January 2nd, I was supposed to go back to work, and I just didn't go to work. And that continued for several days until January 6th, which is now a date that lives in infamy, but at the time, January 6th, I was like, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to work and it's going to be normal, it's going to be okay. And so I get up and I get on the train to go to work, and this woman jumped in front of my train to try to kill herself. And I was freaked out. I saw too much, and I got off the train and I called my job and I said, hey, something crazy just happened. This woman jumped in front of the train to try to kill herself. And my job was like, well, we still need you to come into work anyway. So I went into work, and then I had to deal with so I had a direct boss, and then I had a big boss. And the big boss is a total Karen, okay? She had the size 0 body and the short jet black haircut, and she was just always wearing cowboy boots no matter what the season was. She was a very annoying witch with a capital B, let's just say that. And she basically, I had to go into a meeting with her, and she basically kind of berated me for a little bit, and I decided that I was going to go home. So my direct boss let me go home, and I went home, and I just didn't go back to work. During this period of me being at home, my friend convinced me to go out with him because he's like, I'm doing a comedy show, just come out with me and hang out with me. He managed to convince me to leave the house to do that. So I left the house to do that. And I get to the show, and he pulls out a bag of mushrooms, and he goes, hey, do you want to do mushrooms with me? And then I'm going to get on stage and do a set. And I was like, this is crazy. But, you know, I was feeling crazy. So I was like, sure, why not? I'll do mushrooms with you. So we do mushrooms together. The mushrooms don't hit for either of us yet. And I have had a very minuscule portion because I've never done mushrooms before. I've never done hallucinogenics. Like, I stick to alcohol and weed and the occasional cocaine because I don't want fat days. And so I'm like, okay, mushrooms, let's do this. So I do the mushrooms. Nothing really happens. And then he goes, well, you want to finish the entire bag of mushrooms? And I was like, sure, I'm going to finish the whole bag of mushrooms. So I finished the bag of mushrooms. And then as things start to hit for me, my friend gets a call from his wife because she's like, hey, I need you to go home and relieve the babysitter. So he's like, I have to go home and take care of my kids high now. So are you going to be okay by yourself? And I was like, yeah, sure, I will be. So I am now by myself tripping balls very hard. And I decided that it's a good idea for me to walk out of the bar that we're at. And I walk through City Hall Park. I took off my shoes and socks, and I just walk around City Hall Park barefoot, which, yikes, no, tetanus. But I was risking it because mushrooms will make you do anything. So I'm walking through this park, and I decided it's a good idea to call my boyfriend and basically just be like, I think something's wrong with me. I don't know. I can't leave the house, and now I'm like barefoot in this park, and I don't know. There are raccoons nearby. Who knows? It's fun. It's like Christopher Robin. And he was like, you need to go home. And we get to a huge argument, and I'm just like, I don't even know like what we're doing together. And he's like, okay, I need you to get on a train and just go home. And so I get on a train, but I'm still high, and I realize that enclosed spaces don't work for me. So I get off of the train, and it's a 50-block walk back to my apartment. But I walk all 50 of those blocks, and I'm just like going through it, and I'm like just, you know, basically like metamorphizing everything or making everything into a metaphor where I'm like, wow, these bricks are just like heavy, like my life and my workload. And then I get home and I take a massive shit. And it was like, this shit was like, oh, like something just needs to come out of me and I need to be just done with everything. And so the next day I sober up and I break up with my boyfriend. I tell him this just isn't working. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't leave the house and I know this is not working out anymore. And so I continue to just not leave the house. I continue not going to work. I haven't told my coworkers what's happening. And it gets to a point where in a just panic, I call my friend who's like a really good therapist, very, very good friend of mine. And she was like, okay, Calvin, like you're having a nervous breakdown. And I was like, that's not what it is. Cause I don't think that things like that happen to me. You know, like you think that kind of stuff happens to people who are weak or like people who like don't give a shit about their lives. And my friend was like, no, like it's not about that. It's about the fact that you are having a nervous breakdown. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find you a therapist and I need you to go and see this therapist. And so she gets me to go in and I go to see this therapist who's a very lovely, amazing, amazing queer person. And I tell the therapist at first, I was like, oh, I think I just can't leave home because of the suicide. And she was like, I think it's more than that, because it would take more than like a suicide for you to just completely shut down. And I start to open up to her, and I start to explain to her that like I can't leave the house because I'm tired. Because I'm tired of dealing with people's bullshit and having to smile and project this happy image every day. And she was like, then you shouldn't. You should talk about this, and I will give you mechanisms so that you can feel like you're finally in your own space instead of cramming yourself into fitting into these like white, non-queer spaces. And she really opened me up, and she helped me to learn how to say no and set boundaries and helped me to like get fired from the job that I hated and find something better for myself. And I remember like it was after a year, and I remember there was the next Christmas, I still took my week off. But this time I was actually able to go out and see friends, and I was actually able to go and have dinner with my parents without feeling annoyed at all the questions about me not being a doctor. And I just thought it was so funny that it took like a Jewish lesbian for me to have a nice Christmas, you know? So thank you very much.
Keep it going for Calvin, everyone. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And I really appreciate when comics get on this stage and are just like vulnerable and honest. And I don't know, I feel like it's like kind of such a, I don't know, I I just really fucking appreciate that. Yeah, really fucking appreciate it. So thank you to all the storytellers. To close us out, this is the end of me talking. We just have a really amazing video from Marcos that they're about to play, but just in kind of closing so that we can just like roll right out after that. Like I'm acting like y'all are in the space. It's us that are in the space. I'm going to put a link. We're always looking for storytellers. You know, and you don't have to have any experience. Again, you can be coached by even somebody who's not me. Yeah, and our next show is hopefully in IRL, January 23rd. The theme is assumptions. So yeah, thank you very much. And now we're going to hear from Marcos. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, guys. I'm sorry I can't be with you physically. Omicron is around and she's attacking everybody, and it's really easy to catch her, and she wants to say Merry Christmas to you all. So I don't want her Christmas cheer, and I already had COVID, I guess 0.1, so or 1.1. So you know, at this point, I don't want to catch anything, but I want to be here with you guys. So here's my piece. It's called The Holidays Are a Challenge, and I hope you like it. So I've set it up like a play, guys. So it's in different scenes, but you know, I promise you'll be somewhat entertained. Scene 1 at home, time, Christmas Eve, 1991, West Palm Beach, Florida. Imagine this. Ray Namit, my father, 33 years old, young, a recent widower. He had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. The boy was 8 and she was 4. Their mother Maria had died in May, complications of lupus. The first Christmas without her, not much music, nor was there any Filipino food. It was an unusually hot Christmas Eve, but all Christmas Eves in Florida are either hot or humid. Most of the family was still back up north in Queens, Long Island, or New Jersey. Except for them, they were all they had against the world. The boy, Marcos, had already begun to show signs of impending gayness, which, of course, I had been told all my life. And it was obvious I was going to turn out gay. But he wasn't thinking about that. He only had one thing in mind. There were no presents. Although he did hear that Disney's Beauty and the Beast did come out to cineplexes everywhere. This was a time when movies were at the malls. He begged to see the movie. I looked back and realized that his dad had been numb. Of course, who wouldn't? Scene 2 at the movies. His dad, without a beat, said yes, taking both of his kids with him in tow in their Toyota Previa minivan, and drove to the mall to see Disney's Beauty and the Beast. Here's the library. I'm hanging out. You know, hopefully the Beast comes out. The boy fell in love with the young, blonde-haired, blue-eyed prince who turned into a hairy beast, and he found himself attracted to that big, hairy barrel chest. Imagine an animated cartoon eroticized. He wanted to be Belle, reading all the books she could find, being given that gorgeous golden library, the library of his dreams, where he could, with this beast, read The Three Musketeers together, or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or Robinson Crusoe, or Heidi. He fantasized about being enveloped in the beast's big hairy arms, only to find himself missing his mother terribly, wishing it would be her arms instead. Once the beast was transformed back to the prince, the movie ended. The 3 of them left the afternoon matinee in silence. The boy felt the tears coming, but blinked them back for fear of shame. His dad would yell at him. Scene 3 at the Burger King. I remember that there was a point in my life where my family didn't have much money. My dad, with 2 little kids, single and lonely, did not have much to buy at that time. As I grew older, I realized what a miser he could be. But I do realize at that moment, in December 1991, he didn't have much money. The 2 kids were hungry, so their dad drove them to a Burger King on Blue Heron Boulevard. Stepping aside, they were the only 3 there. Their dad ordered them a cheeseburger, chicken tenders, and French fries, and they ate in silence. I remember their dad didn't even ask them how the movie was or if they liked it. Only that the boy wanted the beast, and his mother at the same time, unable to figure out what that meant. Suddenly the boy couldn't breathe and felt another asthma attack coming. He vomited all of his food, his dad grabbing him and his sister and leaving the rubbish on the counter, and drove him to St. Mary's Hospital. Scene 4 at the hospital. He knew this meant a nebulizer treatment. The boy was crying that he threw up his favorite food, and now there was a nurse that was going to make him breathe through a tube of some weird tasting cold air, where it's supposed to make him feel better, except the mucus filled his lungs up quickly. His dad and sister stayed in the waiting room while the boy coughed and cried and begged to see his mother, but she wasn't coming. Then there was a TV in the room, and he saw the commercial for Beauty and the Beast. Closing his eyes, he was dancing with the Beast and not Belle, as Angela Lansbury's Mrs. Potts comforted them both, that they weren't alone in that big ballroom, where the boy kept looking which way back to the library. Scene 5, now. That was 30 years ago. The boy who eventually became me eventually accepted that the holidays can be challenging, but my story here wasn't how it sucked, but how it can be difficult, being chronically ill. Eventually parting ways and somewhat cutting ties off with your family, moving away from Florida and creating your own family, a gang of men, students, former students, lovers of some kind or another, all make up this part of yourself that keeps you from being lonely. Loneliness is a tale as old as time, but processing and moving on is what makes creating more holidays memories completely worth it. Thank you.